Ladies and gentlemen, we'll start the meeting. We had a little bit of a glitch with Zoom. I don't appear on the screen in front of me, but I'm here. Anyway, I would ask everybody to join in the singing of O Canada, followed by our land acknowledgement. In 1820, Indigenous people here began welcoming settlers from all over the empire. Soon, they were helping slaves escaping from the U.S. to settle here too. Today, our Indigenous founding partners are still here enjoying this land with us. They fish and camp under their treaty rights. Indigenous people in their thousands also live with us as neighbors and friends. Our Indigenous white and Black settlers created a community with an attractive degree of harmony and prosperity. In 1857, Ontario gave official recognition of Oakville as a town. At Town Hall, all of these years later, we fly the flag of the Mississauga and of the Credit beside the flags of Oakville, Ontario, and Canada. We fly these flags together to acknowledge our origins. People from all over the world are attracted to the livability we have created. We offer newcomers a warm spirit of welcome. We offer everyone our founding story so everyone knows what we are a part of. We feel sorrow and distress for acts of racism and intolerance suffered across Canada and here at home. We want our future to be equitable and inclusive for all. The path of truth and reconciliation can unite us all. Please keep well, stay safe, and let us on council know of any chance to be helpful to you and yours. Please let us know anytime you can help increase Oakville's harmony, prosperity, and livability. Madam Clerk, I would believe we have regrets from Mayor Burton and everyone else is here. Okay. Do we have any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, can I have a mover and seconder for the confirmation of the minutes? Councillor Longo and Councillor Chisholm, thank you. Any opposed? That's carried. And I need a mover and seconder to move into the committee of the whole. Councillors Chinna and Councillor Knoll, thank you. Any opposed? That's carried. We're now in committee of the whole, and as such, we only need a mover, not a seconder. I understand from some of my colleagues that there are a few separations from the consent items. Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For me, if I could separate 7.1 and 7.3, please.
Are there any further separations? Councillor Elgar?
Yes, Acting Mayor, I would like to separate also 7.2, fighting kites.
Okay, are there any other additions? If not, could I have...
could I separate 7.4?
7.4, absolutely. Sorry, Councillor
Thank you, Acting
McNeese.
Chair.
Okay, and Councillor Haslett-Thiel. So 7.5, 7.6, 7.7, 7.8, and 7.9. And I wonder if we can also have that motion incorporate the confidential consent item 8.1. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Lischina, thank you. All those opposed? That's carried. So we'll start with 7.1. I believe that's you, Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd like to thank staff for preparing the report and also for meeting with a few of us last week to go over some of the concerns that we had on this issue. And I'm not sure, Madam Chair, if there's somebody to delegate on this issue or not. Maybe before I get into it, if somebody wanted to delegate, we could hear from the delegation, and then I could bring forward a motion after that.
I believe we do have a delegation that wanted to delegate on this item. Is that correct? Adrian. Adrian Gordon. Oh, she's on Zoom. Thank you. Hi, Adrian. Thank you for joining us. Please go ahead.
Hi, good evening. Good evening, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak briefly tonight on behalf of the Downtown Oakville, Bronte, and Kerr BIA. My name is Adrian Gordon, and I've had the privilege of working for the Downtown Oakville BIA for over the past 2 years. Previous to that, spent over 15 years in the strategic marketing and advertising space. I'm hoping tonight to spend a few moments to be able to share some thoughts for consideration on sponsorship signage and how the landscape continues to evolve, and thus the ability to be recognizing and acknowledging our sponsors within the BIA has also changed. Next slide, please. Overall, a sponsorship is one of the key pillars with the BIA strategy. In addition to marketing, member engagement, beautification, sponsorship and partnership is a key pillar to help with the health and the success of downtown. Our sponsorships drive funding, awareness, and create new and innovative opportunities to help to continue to support the local businesses and drive the economic health of our BIAs. Based on our current signed bylaws, there is limited opportunity for sponsorship partners to be represented in the BIAs. The way that BIA is able to acknowledge and represent sponsorship has a significant impact on the future of our downtowns. And because of this, it's critical to find new ways to improve our existing opportunities and provide a level of sponsorship and recognition for BIAs within our current bylaw regulations. Next slide, please. Overall, the sponsorship landscape has changed. The relationship between brands and sponsors continues to evolve and is moving at a rapid pace. Unlike years ago, when some might say sponsorship, you might have visions of big logos being splashed around. Sponsorship is not just about logo placement anymore. It's about integrating into the customer journey and intercepting the consumer as part of an experience. An example might come to mind as Amex with the front of the line. It's about providing an experience, solving a pain point, and finding a way to be integrated for a memorable experience for that consumer. As we know, technology has put advertising in the hands of consumers 24/7. So with that, brands need to find new ways to have their brands represented at multiple touch points. As our BIAs continue to look for sponsors to help fund and expand our offering, the parameters and rules around which the sponsors can show up within our BIAs also need to evolve. Sponsorship can help BIAs deliver on key pillars of their strategy, including sponsoring year-round beautification, marketing of events and activations, and member engagement. Many of the sponsorships now are looking beyond just a one-night event. They're looking at ways that their brand can live ongoing for 8 to 12 year-round opportunities. And with this, BIAs offer rich opportunities to do so. Next slide, please. Some of the considerations for success really are that the BIA and the town of Oakville both want to ensure that we protect and respect the character of our town and our commercial districts through appropriate signage. We share a unique and reciprocal relationship between the BIA and the town. Whereas when the BIA is successful on delivering on their brand strategies, such as goals around beautification and marketing, the town also benefits. The BIAs truly are stewards of their brand now, and thus can help to manage the integration of brand sponsors and help to ensure that those fit within the overall and our own brand standards themselves. Strategic sponsorship create valuable funding and opportunities to ensure that they continue to thrive and support the economic health of our BIAs. You'll see here as an example on the screen. This is an example of what an integration looks like from a BIA strategic standpoint. Example, best part of the day is the Downtown Oakville strategic mission, as well as how you might incorporate that with a brand sponsor who also shares in wanting to share their brand values and integrate into that positive experience their consumers are having in downtown. Next slide, please. Overall, looking ahead, in order for our BAs to be able to continue to do great and innovative work and support our businesses, we need to be able to evolve how we showcase and integrate sponsorships into our programming. As the landscape continues to evolve, there is an urgency to resolve how we recognize and acknowledge our sponsors and the need to look at alternative recommendations that can be used to move these bylaws reviews quicker. Overall, we ask that we look at ways potentially to explore and how we can use existing opportunities to provide a level of sponsorship recognition for BIAs within current bylaw recognitions. As an example, including the use of digital town kiosks and mobile signs. Next slide, please. Thank you so much for your time and consideration on this topic.
Thank you very much for your delegation and for taking the time to share that information with us. I have Councillor Giddings who has a question.
Thank you for joining us this evening, Adrian. You talked about improving existing opportunities. Is that up to the BIA, or is that a town initiative, or is that a collaborative?
So an example for that, Councillor Giddings, would be a collaborative effort. So I use the example of the Downtown Oakville digital screens that are owned by the town. We use that as the BIA to promote our activities and our offerings in the downtown. Currently, under the bylaw regulations, we are not able, as you saw on the slide there, to showcase a sponsor logo within that creative. So if we have our TV Songs of Summer as an example, we wouldn't be able to showcase that. And that is an example of something that is existing currently, that within parameters, whether it follows the same parameters as the mobile community where you've got the logo at the 15%, that would be an example of being able to have a huge impact in our situation to be able to integrate sponsorship in a meaningful but also controlled way.
Thank you. And that was the summer, the TD Sounds of Summer on slide 5, I believe. That wouldn't be allowed any longer?
It would not be allowed now. It's currently not allowed.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McNeese.
Yes, through you, Acting Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. That was really good. I just had a quick question for clarity. The mobile signs you mentioned at the end, I'm just trying to envision those because I've seen them before where they're kind of our repurposed construction signs that might say Canada Day down in Ward 1, but are there more aesthetically pleasing ones out there that you're thinking of?
There actually isn't currently more aesthetic pleasing ones than those. Those were used as an example to say currently you can use a specific portion of that to delegate it to a sponsor, but then perhaps that same opportunity could be provided to the digital screens as an example in Downtown Oakville. I would say the digital screen is an evolution and hopefully a something we can do across all BIAs in future, because they would be what I would consider the next level of a community board.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any further? Councillor O'Meara, would you be pleased to move the item?
I will, Madam Chair. So a revised resolution was circulated to members of council earlier today. If it's okay, I might just read it briefly for anyone who might not have seen it. It is as follows, that staff be directed to conduct a comprehensive review, including public consultation, to obtain input into the appropriate locational criteria governing third-party advertising signs, including sponsorship signs, having regard to the objectives that the town seeks to achieve and the need to achieve them in a manner that impairs the rights of advertisers as minimally as possible, at an estimated cost of $250,000 to be funded through the tax stabilization reserves, which staff are granted authority to single source to select the supplier rather than engage in a competitive process for procuring so as not to delay the review. Secondly, that staff be directed to install additional community mobile signs on town property for the exclusive use of BIAs and charitable or not-profit organizations, which allows the recognition of sponsorship in accordance with the town's sound bylaw at an estimated cost of $6,000 to be funded through tax stabilization reserve. And lastly, that staff prepare a policy for council regarding the use of town digital kiosks by the BIAs to allow them to include sponsorship details. So I do want to thank staff for working with us on this. When we came out of COVID, we started to get a lot of these concerns from our, not just our BIAs, but in particular in Brawny, it was the Brawny Legion, about how do we put on events, how do we do these things that the community wants to support and that businesses in these areas want to support, but we're not allowed to recognize them and their participation in that. So we've been working on this, and Councillor Hazeltine and Councillor Giddings as well, on what we can do to bring this forward. As staff have rightly outlined to us, you know, there's a larger comprehensive review of signs and how we use signs that needs to be done to underpin how we move forward. So again, we can continue to protect our heritage and our cultural and our urban design and look and feel. But I think we're all realizing we need some speed to help our BIAs and to help our legions and our charitable and not-profits while we do that work. It's my understanding that work needs to be done anyway. The province has changed definitions of employment land, so already our definitions of where third-party advertising and signs can be need to be reviewed because the province has amended that legislation. So this is work that already needs to be done and will have to be done. We're just asking council to let staff sort of get at it a little earlier and give our BIAs the ability to thank the people who put on the events that all of our residents so rightly are asking for. So thank you very much to staff and to everyone for that. And yes, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I know that Councillor Chisholm has been of a similar vein with the Kerr BIA, and we thank Doug Sands for attending as well this evening. Are there any opposed to the motion? Sorry, questions? I'm very sorry. Councillor Adams.
Thanks very much. And so first of all, I wanted to thank Sean for circulating the motion in advance. I really appreciate having the advance notice about what the discussion would be like tonight to be able to frame the conversation better and so forth. So that's very, very much appreciated, Sean. Thanks very much. I wonder if our staff could give us their comments on the proposed revised resolution, in particular the issue of the single sourcing. I wondered whether that was necessary and whether that's normal.
Mr. Berry.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Chair. Through you, the benefit of single sourcing allows us to get this done in a shorter period of time. Unfortunately, if we follow the normal process, we're afraid that we're not going to be able to accomplish what we want to accomplish before the next season starts, so the next spring season. This will allow us to get this done quicker, start the process. And when we're talking about single sourcing, it's consultants we're talking about. So we don't have to go through that larger competitive process for consultants, especially for planning consultants that we will need for this process.
And so given the other recommendations and other material that's been provided to council on this issue, is the staff supportive of this direction?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, staff believe that this is possible within the workloads based on the criteria that we've included in the recommendation.
So it's possible, but are you supportive of this particular direction?
Through you, Madam Chair, absolutely. In that it allows us to proceed in a way that's cautious enough that we don't risk the integrity of the bylaw.
Thank you. Okay.
Councillor Grant.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Councillor Adams caught most of my questions, but I will ask, are item 2 and 3 kind of putting the cart before the horse? We're asking for a review and we're saying, but also we want this and this. And I would also just like to couch that in thanking Councillor O'Meara for presenting this to us earlier, so it gave me a chance to kind of go through and consider the implications, given I have a good history with the signed bylaw.
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, absolutely, Councillor, you do. What I would say is that allows the amendments being made there, being considered there, are within the current bylaw. We can do that within the current bylaw. So the bylaw does allow for community mobile signs with 15% of sponsorship on it. What we're identifying with that recommendation is each BIA will get one of those for their sole use. So it maintains the integrity of the bylaw. It's consistent with the bylaw. It just gives use of one in the different BIAs. The recommendation number 3 is with the current digital signs downtown. We've looked at those as a sign as opposed to something similar to our bus shelters and that type of thing. And what we want to do with that is take the time to look at what policy might be able to allow us to be consistent with other sponsorship opportunities we have in the town, while still being, again, maintaining the integrity of the bylaw.
Okay. One of the topics of discussion that's come up recently when I've been discussing the signed bylaw with people is the idea of precedent setting. Does this set any kind of precedent that we would be concerned about down the road?
Through you, Madam Chair, again, we did have a long discussion about that, and I know that legal and Nadia Chandra is here, and we've worked on this in the past and currently. And we both feel that we're not opening the bylaw up at this point with these moves more than it currently allows. The next step will be to review it, and what we bring back will give you advice on that.
Okay. And in doing all of this, we're making sure that we hold tight to the bylaws that we have now that protect us, that were protected at the Supreme Court.
Through you, Madam Chair, certainly the advice that comes back will reflect any dangers that maybe you may need to consider when that information is provided.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor No.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The two previous speakers covered off most of my questions. My only question I have is, where did the $250,000 come from? This seems an awful lot of money for a consultant to do this sort of work. And just to put it in context, the police service, for example, we're doing a region-wide consultation for less than half of that towards our 2024-2028 business plan. So I'm very surprised at $250,000. I have absolutely no problem with the motion. I think it's a brilliant idea to move forward with it, but I'm just very concerned about that much money for a consultant.
Through you, Madam Chair. The issue, again, we don't have this in our current plans, in our current work plan, so moving it forward will require additional internal staffing, so business advisors to help us out. It'll require legal advice and will require planning. So by the time we're done, add that into the consultation, and we anticipate it'll be in that neighborhood, again, without doing a detailed review, but we wanted to make sure that we could proceed with that. That amount of money is what we anticipate in the neighborhood it'll allow us to move this forward.
But the $250,000 isn't what you're budgeting for a consultant. That's for the overall project?
That's for the overall project.
We could just divvy up that by 10 and give it to the 10 charity. I'm just kidding. Okay, if that's what with your professional advice, if that's what you're suggesting, I'll support it, but that seems like an awful lot of money for that kind of consultation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Haslett-Theo.
Thank you very much, and thank you to Councillor O'Meara for his moving of the motion and circulating it earlier. So Councillor Chisholm, McNeese, myself, and Councillor O'Meara met with staff, and I think that this is a good resolution from that discussion. And in particular, what I appreciated was the openness to having something short-term while we were still protecting what was hard fought for, and allowing for the expertise that you highly recommended we get. So if a seconder is needed, I'm pleased to second it. It was almost a year ago that we asked for a report on sponsorship signage, and hence another reason why we asked for your support to move it along a little bit quicker. as Adrian Gordon expressed well, the landscape is shifting and people invest in the longer term projects, and we don't want to miss a window where, which would allow us to have even better and more effective events at all three BIAs. This is not just about one, it's about all three and the success of the commercial district. So I'm pleased to support it.
Thank you. Councillor Lischina.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm supportive of this, but I'm not sure if the wording is clear enough to understand that the 250 is not for a single source supplier. Is that clear enough in here?
I think Mr. Barry's looking to our legal.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think we believe it's clear. It's clear enough for us. Unless there is some need to clarify more, the intent is that it's for the project.
We'll be coming after you if it's for a single source supplier.
I think given the questions and answers we've had this evening, that definitely points to the project being in its entirety. It's been moved by Councillor O'Meara. Is there any further discussion? And if not, any opposed? That's carried. And we'll move on to 7.2. Councillor Elgar, you wanted to speak in regards to fighting kites.
Thank you. Acting Mayor Duddick, thank you very much. I'm really glad that staff have brought this report forward. I've been working on this with people, especially one individual, Vanessa Warren, who is the owner of the ranch on Burnhamthorpe Road, just east of Bronte Road and just north of 407, who had major concerns with this kite fighting line that is on her property and keeps happening. I'm glad to see that staff in the report did an excellent job of saying what the string is. And the string is used for kite fighting, is sharp, can be made of metal, wire, piano wire, fishing line, or types of nylon string that has been chemically treated or that contains glass fragments. And that's exactly what it is. And that is exactly what is still landing on her property. As recently as today, I talked to her, and she said, I don't think they're going to do anything, I've given up, but I just keep trying to pick it up all the time. It has not lessened over the last few years at all. As I go through the staff report, I was surprised that that the kite string has the potential to injure people. When I got to that point, I decided to grab the internet for about 5 minutes, and there, the first thing I noticed in January of 2023, 3 children among the 6 killed Indian kite fighting. And then it goes on. Motorcyclists have their throats slit. This is not children's kite line we're talking about here. This is line which has got fibers. It's like a cotton line with the glass fibers glued onto it. The whole intent is for kite fighting. The winner of the kite fight is the person who still has his own kite on the string. The name of the game is cut the other guy's string. So it's happening in Oakville, and it's happening, when I think about Burnhamthorpe Road and I think of 407 and where her place is, and the fighting is taking place not on her property, it is taking place on other property. So these kites, the string is cut, it is crossing over 407. It is then landing on her property and other properties. And when I read what staff have come back with, I don't see how we're addressing the potential lethal problem here. These strings can slit your neck, and they do slit necks. And if you look, I sent it to, so you don't want to do council business on email. And I've seen that people getting chastised for that. So not wanting to do that, I talked to staff on Friday and said it would be okay to send it out. Staff, the clerk's department advised, send it to us and we can send it out when we get to the item on Monday evening. So that's fine, and that's what I've done, like I've given it to the clerk, and there's a lot of stuff to read tonight if you want to. I'm sure staff have probably read it, but this is not, we're not playing with kids' kites here. This is a killer sport for the fun of it, of cutting the strings, which is good sport, and it's used all over, and a lot of countries have tried to ban it. They're having trouble. And as far as finding who owns the string, there's not much DNA on the string after it's been cut and then lands on someone else's property. I really have a lot of trouble accepting that we're not really going to address the potential legal issue here. And I'm wondering if our legal staff can help me understand why we would allow a sport like this, which will, not saying it has, will cause someone's death in Oakville. And probably it'll be somebody on a motorcycle, I would guess. And I happen to have a motorcycle. So I just feel that, I feel it's not safe. And I wonder why we would not be banning kite fighting. Not to be confused with kite flying at all, which very few people understand the sport or know about it.
Councillor Elger, yeah, there are several options, even though staff did recommend that they're recommending option number 1. So maybe what you're asking of staff is consideration of either option 2 or 3 versus going with option 1. Is that what you're?
Definitely option 1, I believe, should be off the table altogether. Option 3, banning flying of kites, no. Absolutely not. Okay. I am only concerned with the fighting
option
kites.
Option 2.
Option 2 with the fighting kites.
Okay.
And legally, can we do that? And also, do we have staff available that can monitor this? And I would really like to hear from staff whether we can monitor this and control it.
I believe there were several departments involved, including Parks and Rec, as well as yourself, Mr. Barry, but thank you. Maybe you can respond.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'll try and put a little further information around this. Certainly from, and I would agree, Councillor, that we also recognize there's dangers when it comes to the strings and the issues that you've raised. Some of the issues do come from an enforcement standpoint. Again, if we create a bylaw, right now we have no park enforcement. We don't necessarily have the tools to respond to the bylaw if it were passed right now. Again, you've also raised some other issues around identifying where the string comes from, especially in a situation like that where it may be coming from yards or miles away. We don't really know. And that does set up a situation where somebody will expect enforcement that we just couldn't, we could never achieve because there's no way to track that back. So we do think there's probably a progressive way to deal with this, and some of that progression, which is why we've recommended the information piece, because we do have to start getting that out there. People recognize that it's that this is happening and that they need to stop. And after that comes bylaws and enforcement, and that can actually coincide with some of the work we're doing on the municipal enforcement strategy that'll come forward later in this year.
So, Mr. Barry, do we have any gun controls in Oakville? And how do we get a gun control that you can't really walk around with a gun in Oakville? What bylaw is that?
Through you, Madam Chair, that would be dealt with through the police. Certainly nothing that we would send bylaw enforcement staff after.
So it's the police to decide whether Oakville could have a gun or not, and not the farmers in the area? I'm just trying to figure out. It's nothing to do. It's definitely provincial.
Through you, Madam Chair, we do have a bylaw that says you can't, the firearms bylaw, but again, that's enforced by the police. But there is federal, and it may, federal or provincial legislation around gun control as well, federal legislation.
Okay. But we do have a bylaw then?
We have a bylaw around it, yeah.
So if we had a bylaw for kiting lines, that could be enforced by the police?
Through you, Madam Chair, that's something that we would have to discuss with the police. And I would also highlight, going back to it, just because the line is there, tying that back to a person or dealing with a person is very difficult.
I'd say almost impossible.
Yes.
And in other countries, what they're doing now is actually, you're right, they're using drones because they've outlawed it. I've gone through, they've outlawed it in other countries, and it is happening. But by us not having any controls, Are we vulnerable at all that we could be sued for not doing anything now?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm not sure I could speak to that, and I don't know whether from a legal standpoint.
Through you, Madam Chair. The municipality has general authority to pass bylaws to regulate health and safety matters. So certainly as a general matter, we would have the authority to enter into options 2 or 3 if that were the direction that council were to give staff. I think what you're hearing is there's certainly enforcement challenges, and Mr. Barry has tried to share those. What we've tried to set out here is a progressive approach to undergo a program of public education to ensure that the strings are not left behind. But if that is a progressive approach that perhaps is not moving quick enough for council, then that's why we've presented those alternative options.
But with all due respect, to be fair, if you're at a kite fight on the south side of 407, and the key is you're going to cut the kite line, and the line gets cut, I'm sorry, but how is that person, is he supposed to run across the fence onto 407, across 407, and across the other fence and onto the farmer's field? Like, that's just an example, but like, I'm having trouble with this one, an awful lot of trouble.
So perhaps I could address, Councillor Algar, through you, Madam Chair. I think our dilemma in presenting this report is, as Mr. Barry has said, it's always best to start with an education program and move through those steps. And so we've started with an education program as the best way to start on the issue, which even if you go to all 3, you still need an education program to make an overall program work. We have not recommended a ban at this time. We have a little bit more work to do on that. But I think most importantly, we don't have the enforcement staff to actually make that ban effective. And so if you wanted to proceed with the ban, certainly we could report back on that in terms of a ban and the implications of it. As Mr. Barry has said, we are working on the municipal enforcement strategy. So that will look at all the mechanisms we would have in order to be able to actually resource the ability to deal with the banning of the fighting kites.
So how long would we have to wait for that? Because we have, right now, I've been waiting about 3 years. And like, how can we make sure this is done before somebody does have their throat slit, whether it be a child or an adult, because it is happening?
So in terms of the municipal enforcement strategy, we intend to bring that forward in the fall.
By fall?
Pardon?
By fall?
By
we would
fall,
have that?
so that you can have that under consideration for your budget time.
Well, I'm wondering if anybody else wants to speak to it, because, good, because I'm not comfortable with that right now, so I will stand down for now. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Councillor Shi?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So based on the report, it was suggestion to initiate a public education campaign in 2023, but the necessary resource include the 2024, the operation budget request. So after receiving the budget approval, the staff will prepare and launch the public education campaign to promote safety in this park, in our parks. So however, I'm confused as to why the report recommend implementing the campaign in 2023 when it appears more logical to allocate it to 2024 because we need the budget approved.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think there's probably 2 elements to the to getting to that point, and I know my colleague Chris Mark is here, and the education piece will be through parks and open space, and so we can start getting ready for the education program. The issue is going to be costs. If there are costs associated with it, we do have to go to budget for that. So it can almost start immediately. It's just where do we see those costs coming? How much are they? And is it within current budget, or do we have to then go to budget for approval for that?
Okay, understand. Thank you.
Councillor Giddings?
Thank you. Through you, Councillor Elgar has answered asked most of my questions. I take it with kite fighting, you have to have that sharp line. There isn't like a touch version. It's the act of cutting the line that declares the winner or whatever.
Through you, Madam Chair, in everything I've read, that's the case, yes.
All right, yeah, I think I was on some of the same websites as Councillor Elder this afternoon. I learned about the tens of thousands of people that are killed every year. The birds that are damaged as they go out to make their nests in the spring that gets caught up in lawnmowers, people walking on it, and it's an incredibly fine sharpness to it. I question the liability as well, and I don't know how we could possibly identify who owns a line. It's like finding fishing line at the side of a river. Like somebody's put it there, you don't know whose it is. The other question is how many it's to be restricted to private properties. How many private properties do we have where you can have 2 or more people flying kites? Like it just speaks to me that this is going to be another issue, like fireworks in schoolyards and football fields and public parks.
Through you, Madam Chair, absolutely, this does become an issue, and for all of the reasons that have been discussed tonight, there's issues identifying owners, there's issues finding where it's happening, there's issues if we move it from one place to another place. And that, again, this comes back to the reason we need to look at this in a comprehensive method. And I do think it needs to be progressive so that we can learn as we go, because to be honest, this is something new. This is certainly not something that we've dealt with in the past. We have heard about it, we are learning about it. It's just finding the right tactic to try and resolve it.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Longo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Barry, just a quick question. In light of the information that Councillor Elgar circulated, there is some element of urgency. Is there anything that you'd recommend because of the issue of enforcement and the enforcement review that's happening in the fall, but then also public education and public consultation to find out if there are property owners, but then also people who actually want to do this as fighting kites? Is there an opportunity to engage the public as part of this? What would your recommendation be?
Through you, Madam Chair, I do believe that there are some opportunities, again, as we start being progressive on this, we can meet with the actual enthusiasts and try and understand how, if there's an opportunity for them, or again, back to the, is there a touch version of this? We don't know, we can certainly meet with them, and that can be one part of a program. As we've indicated, there's also the municipal enforcement strategy that's coming forward. If we pair this up and we learn as we go, we have the opportunity then to build that into the process, and that strategy is looking out 5 to 8 years, so we can plan for this as we go.
Would you have a recommended different option than the 3 that are in front of us that could kind of bring that all together, coinciding it with the enforcement review, public education and consultation, as well as understanding the safety, public safety?
Through you, Madam Chair, I can certainly provide something.
Is that, okay. Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you. I guess the question I'm asking is with respect to private and public property, the propensity of this happening, is it happening in our public parks or is it on private property?
Through you, Madam Chair, I believe it's happening in both. We have issues in private property, we have issues in conservation property, and we have issues in parks property.
I'm just trying to think of this, if it's called a sport. This is something that doesn't happen, they're done and they're out. This could be kind of a lengthy kind of an activity. I think your education might be more in the reporting of the public, reporting these incidences on public parks and in private. That's the only way I can see getting police there or whoever municipal enforcement there on time. It's not a quick turnaround. It could be there for a couple of hours. So in the education, reporting would probably be a very important part of educating the public for reporting processes.
Through you, Madam Chair, I do believe in a second phase. That is, you're absolutely right. I think the first phase is trying to get out there and let people know that we're aware of this and that there are these issues and try and discourage the activity that way. But certainly as we build an enforcement element to it, absolutely, the reporting element is key.
Yeah, may I suggest is that if we're looking at this as reporting, that we work through our children in our schools, because that's going to hit home very quickly, knowing that there is some danger out there for our children. So I just leave it as that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor No.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I too was doing some internet searching today, and I continue to do it this evening on this issue. I'm curious about what other jurisdictions are doing. I think I found that the only jurisdiction I saw actually has an outright ban is somewhere, I think it's Afghanistan or Pakistan, I can't recall. I tried to find the article, but I know Toronto was looking at it. I saw articles from 2011, but I never saw what the outcome was. What is the landscape for municipal enforcement on this area and other jurisdictions?
Through you, Madam Chair, it's very sparse. This is, again, an emerging issue around in our area. I might call Selena Campbell. I know she's done a fair bit of research on our end. So.
I don't think there's much by the shaking of the head.
Thank you. Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. Mr. Berry is absolutely correct. It is a very much an emerging topic. We certainly understand the significance of it and the impact not only on the agricultural properties and wildlife and people. It's something that a number of municipalities are starting to look at, but there's not a lot out there as far as regulations that are within Canada at this point. But certainly we'll be keeping our eye on that.
Do we know what the outcome was of the Toronto debate?
I don't know, sorry, not off the top of my head.
Because I know that it was quite topical. There's several articles in 2011 about this issue in Toronto. Okay. Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hasledale.
I just have a question about a possible hold. Is it, when we have other issues, sometimes we can put an interim control bylaw, to use the bigger phrase. Is there a way to pause while you do further research, just in terms of the liability and the obviously concern we have for children's safety? Can you put a temporary hold on something? Have we ever done that before?
Through you, Madam Chair, this is unlike land use planning where you can stop a building or construction or a use on a property. In this case, we would have to enact a bylaw that prohibited it. That would act as the hold, but then we're into the exact same thing. How do you enforce that? Because it's not just an area, it becomes the entire town, where you're saying you can't do that activity in the town. So in effect, it's the same as putting in a bylaw to prohibit it.
So thank you for clarifying that. I understood it wasn't land use planning, but I'm just trying to look for a possible solution. I guess my other question is, you mentioned reaching out to those that may participate in this and getting their thoughts. So that would be a key part of what you would do in that first phase?
Through you, Madam Chair, absolutely. Again, it's understanding why things are happening now, understand the landscape, and then we're better able to address it.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Elgar.
Thank you. Through Madam Chair, I feel like the police can't really do anything with enforcement until we have something to enforce. I'm looking for some kind of a temporary bylaw, educating people. Like, first of all, 90% of the residents in Oakville will think we're trying to ban children flying kites, and that's the opposite. We're talking a whole different level of kites here. And when you look at what's happening around the world, and young kids' throats being slit and dying, I think we have to do something, and waiting until fall, if something does happen, I think that's too late. Is there not something we can do, even if we say a ban, and then we can educate to understand, tell people why we did it? And there's got to be something we can do so that then at least police can start to try to enforce, even though I realize it's a big problem because there's no DNA on those lines. And putting through a bylaw to say you got to pick up your lines, I feel it won't work because nobody's going to be running into somebody else's property to find the lines. They're just glad they're gone and they don't have to see them anymore. Is there nothing we can do as a town council to relieve a little bit of our feeling of guilt and liability if somebody is critically injured and dies? Is there nothing we can do as a council?
Through you, Madam Chair, again, we do have the we do have the ability to create a bylaw. I mean, we would have to go and take a look at that. That's always there. But the piece I do want to highlight, again, even if the police were willing to enforce, I'm not sure, for all the reasons municipal enforcement would have challenges, so would the police. But there's also the challenge we haven't spoke about, and that's entering private property. And so if this is occurring on private property, not town property, that becomes, again, another challenge, even for the police. So, we're just learning about this now. Not exactly learning about this now, but we're just learning through this now. And I do caution moving forward with a bylaw before we've had the opportunity to progressively look at this and develop something with a clear understanding of how we can manage it.
If we did a bylaw, a temporary bylaw, would we not learn a lot on how to improve our bylaw? Or maybe at the end of the day, we'd say, you know something, we give up. We as a council, we can't, and as staff, we can't deal with it. Is there nothing we can do temporarily so that we'll make more people aware if it's not allowed? You're going to hear from a lot more people, I would assume.
Through Madam Chair, you'd certainly hear from people. My fear is whether it would be a fair test, because we wouldn't have the resources in place to actually respond to it, and we'd be causing issues in other areas and maybe not fairly assessing the bylaw that we put in place. I'm wondering whether we can refer this back for one cycle to see if something could come back. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry.
I was actually just going to suggest the same thing. I'm not sure whether you could report back in one cycle, but certainly quickly back to you. Because I think there are a number of implications with just putting a ban on, assuming that you can take it off later. And the liability may be one of those things. So I would suggest to you or recommend that you refer the banning or ask us to report further on the potential of banning kite flying within the town on public and private property. And we'll bring a report back to you. We do recognize we're bringing the municipal enforcement strategy forward in the fall, so it needs to be coordinated with that. That you'll be looking at budgets for 2024, and I'm sure if we're moving to a ban, it needs to be a part of the conversation in your 2024 budget.
CIO Closey, then what the timeline can we put on that it would be coming back? That would be really helpful.
I think she said one cycle then.
I thought you said it wouldn't be one cycle.
I would suggest a minimum of 2 cycles, and I'm just looking at 2 cycles. Yeah, so that would mean that we'd be reporting back in the August.
I thank you. Okay, I can live with that. I think I was hoping for more, but I understand. It is complicated, but there's a lot at stake here. And I don't want to be a member of this council that voted not to do anything. So I thank you. At the appropriate time, I would move that referral.
Okay. Councillor Chisholm, did you want to comment?
No, I think Jane indicated exactly what we should be doing on this in the cycle on that. So I'm quite fine with that. Thank you.
Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in follow-up to my last conversation, I actually found the bylaw in Toronto. So they did pass the bylaw. It's Municipal Code 60825 it's entitled kites, and it's B subsection 1. While in a park, no person shall fly a kite with string made of hazardous materials. So there is precedent. I did want to say, first of all, I'll support your motion, Councillor Elgar. I think you're onto something here, and thank you for raising it. I will say that you'll recall, Councillor Elgar, through you, Madam Chair, our discussion when we were dealing with pesticides, and it was the same argument. You can't enforce it, so don't create the bylaw. Bylaws have multiple purposes. One, they actually have a purpose of, being enforced in terms of fines, but they also have a purpose of educating. If somebody feels strong enough about creating a law, there's a supposition that it's something important. It's something that the citizenry needs to pay attention to. So I'm totally in support of your initiative. I would, and I'm hoping that staff will have a conversation with their colleagues in Toronto to find out how that went. And definitely, I would love to see some action within 2 cycles, because you've raised a very important point.
Councillor Adams.
Thanks very much. I think that deferral is a good idea, and I wonder if staff, when they're going back for the discussion, can also try to, I think at some point you said you would try to reach out to the enthusiasts, because it's not clear to me what kind of material they're actually using. I know that we've had complaints from property owners who've had the debris fall on their property and the kite strings get wrapped up in their equipment and that kind of thing as an issue. But it's not clear to me whether what we're dealing with is the same kind of things that are reported on Google, the horror stories that have come up from time to time in India and other locations. Are we dealing with the same materials here in Canada, or is it some other set of materials that are being used that have different properties? And I don't know what those might be, but.
Through you, Madam Chair, we'll definitely review that.
That's great. Appreciate that.
Councillor Longo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one last thing is just to include public consultation as part of the referral, if that's possible. So education and consultation.
Don't have time.
Or you won't have time for
Not for 2 cycles.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, time will be the issue. If we can speak with somebody, we will in the 2-cycle period, but certainly future is when we can look to consult.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Grant.
Thank you, and dovetailing on that point, although you can't really go to the public for consultation, I've been looking up, there is no local group, but in Kitchener, Waterloo, and Niagara, they do have kite fighting associations, so perhaps checking with them, seeing how they're trying to control the situation themselves internally might be useful, and seeing if there is a group locally. I'm surprised that this is happening. I'm upset. I'm very glad that Councillor Algar brought this forward, because I've had communications with the residents as well. But certainly, if usually these groups have a good way of at least self-regulating, and maybe we can see if there's some way we can try and get them to do that here. So thank you.
Okay, no further speakers. I think we'll entertain your motion, Councillor Algar, and what would that be?
We would refer this back for, I believe, 2 cycles with CAO, and I'll leave it to the CAO to write the word for word. Like she said it, and I agreed with what she said. I thank you.
Got it? Okay, any of those opposed to the motion? Seeing not, that's carried. Great discussion. 7.3, financial results. Somebody wanted that separate. Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just had a question with our reserves. Do we have reserves in our building department? And do we have like building reserves? And if so, how much is in our building department reserves?
Through you, Madam Chair. So just to make sure I understand the question, you're asking about the building, like our physical buildings or the building department reserve?
No, the building department.
So we do have an enterprise reserve for our building department, which if you look at our reserves that are on Appendix D, there are the summary level items that are listed there. We don't break up the specific one for the building department on there, but that's certainly something that we can provide back to you if you want that specific balance.
Yeah, I'm just, you know, there's a lot of conversation these days about getting permits out and getting things building. So I wondered how much was there, and if we're ensuring that we're sort of doing everything we can from either staffing or whatever we need to make sure that we're issuing the permits as quickly as we can. And if there's some reserve that we've got there, if we can unlock that, or if we should, or if that's a conversation as it comes budget time, I was just curious about that.
Through you, Madam Chair. So you're correct. It is a use of resources that we do have to ensure that as we go through the budget process, we want to make sure that our building department is funded primarily, almost entirely through the fees that we collect. And we're able to, when there's lots of revenue coming in, we save that for when there's less coming in to make sure we can handle all the volume. And we also use it to fund a number of our capital projects. And as we go through the budget process, that's when we use some of that funding for purposes related to our building department.
Okay. Well, I'll look forward to seeing that at this next budget cycle. Thank you for that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there any other questions? If not, Councillor Mayor, are you willing to move that item? Oh, sorry. Apologies, Councillor Heslett-Thiel.
You caught me at my words. I was about to say that I'd be pleased to move recommendation 1 and 2.
Thank you very much. Are there any opposed? If not, that's carried. Thank you very much. And 7.4, I believe that's you again, Councillor O'Meara, is it? Jonathan McNeese, sorry, my apologies.
Yes, thank you, Acting Mayor. Yeah, I mean, as we all know, this sort of hits at the heart of one of our major issues in Bronte Village. I know it affects up by the hospital and over by Sheridan College as well. So in reading through this update and recommendations, I had a bit of concerns just about the timing or this sort of transition over to the province. How set in stone is this time frame that's listed on page 64 of our package? It seems that a lot of the sort of consumer protections at the provincial level are not in place. We're saying here that, you know, phase 2 of applications opening next month, July 4th, for some of these tow operators. I mean, that's pretty soon without knowing, you know, what is going to sort of protect customers. So I'll start with that question and hope for a response from staff.
Through you, Madam Chair. Timelines, that's interesting. I was just checking with Selena on this. The province has put them out. Do we feel confident that they're written in stone and they won't move? No, we can't say that for sure. But we are being told that the intent is January.
Okay, and I just want to make sure that there's not going to be any gaps from us being able to offer the protections that we do. And, you know, I guess, I don't know how we can assure that we feel comfortable with what the province is providing, but there's not going to be a period of no regulation. Can you confirm that?
Through you, Madam Chair, we have not repealed, or there's no intent to repeal our bylaw until the provincial regulations are in place. So although there may not be, we may have to do another licensing cycle, we may have to do another stub period, the regulations won't be repealed until the province takes control.
Okay, and one other aspect of it, is it worth advocating for, say, an audit function to ensure that, you know, for example, I know our previous or our current bylaw requires reporting to the police that a vehicle's been towed and identifying the location it's been towed from. You know, I've personally been hearing contradictory stories over, you know, has the car been towed from such and such a lot, or was it somewhere else? How do we ensure both we get that information and that it's accurate? Would that be some sort of audit function that we would advocate for?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes. Again, since we haven't seen any regulations when it comes to private property, it's very difficult to say what we would ask for because we don't even know what or if it will be in the regulations. But I think the start is to advocate for regulations dealing with it. And once we understand that, we can clarify what we actually need to make it work.
Okay, so for this advocacy piece, I mean, can council be a part of that in, you know, sort of helping identify some of these best practices out there? You know, I've read up on some counties now, it is in the US, but they're, you know, banning trucks from sort of proactively patrolling streets and parking lots, just looking for cars to tow versus getting a call or a complaint and then going to tow a car. I mean, are things like that things that we can advocate for?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm sure we can advocate for how we would like it to how the regulation should, we would want the regulation, sorry, I'm thinking and talking and not doing a very good job. But the advocacy piece is something that's open at this point. But I think, again, I would want to focus on, our main focus should be on making sure that they actually include something, because to this point they haven't.
Okay.
Okay, I'll hold my questions for now and pass over to Councillor O'Meara.
Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you very much for that. So just so I'm clear here, the letter that we've got that was written to the ministry on the 18th, was that our initial comments about these changes here?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, they are not initial. We've had a couple of rounds of meetings with the province on this. What we've advocated for was that their regulation should mimic our bylaw. And to this point, we haven't seen the private property piece come into place.
Okay, and that's a lot of that. A lot of that were my questions in this letter that was written. I just didn't see a lot of stuff that's in our bylaw. So if that, whether it's stamped timeframes about when the tow happens, or must be no cash only, these sorts of things, that we've been advocating for that as well.
Through you, Madam Chair, we've advocated actually for, they could take our bylaw and use that as a model. We haven't got there.
Okay, and we're working through ministry staff then at this point? Is that correct? Or are we speaking as a letter going directly to the minister from this council?
Through you, Madam Chair, it's been with staff to this point. It's been they've been consulting with municipalities across the province that have regulations in place.
Okay. Madam Chair, I know Councillor McNeice might want to have a little bit more of this, but I would like to add that from a mayor to minister level, that this council sends a letter to the minister before all of a sudden the Ontario bureaucracy just flows ahead, and also copy our town MPPs on that, so that we can get a response and have it written there that this council is seeking to have predatory towing and towing on private property either there, or allow municipalities more leverage to regulate that. I'm not sure if that's a direction from staff, or if they would need a motion. I'd be happy to do either, or take my advice from staff.
Madam CEO?
I think we could take that as a staff direction. We are going to be adding it to the intergovernmental priorities, but we can follow up with a letter from the mayor to the minister as well.
Thank you.
Assuming you're going to approve the recommendations as they're drafted. So.
It's a caveat. Okay. Councillor McNeice, did you want to move that?
I'd be happy to.
Thank you. Any opposed? Seeing none, that's carried. Thank you very much. Now we're moving on to the discussion items, and 9.1, display and distribution of objectionable images. We have staff, both legal and our municipal enforcement, to ask or answer any questions if there are any. Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. It was curious to see that we've used Calgary as an example, but we haven't mentioned what London did. And London has actually passed a bylaw making it mandatory that any literature dropped off at a home be in an envelope with marked warning that may contain explicit information. They have done that. That's passed. Woodstock is also in the process of doing the same. And I believe this August, London is looking at the signs. They're arguing that there is psychological harm done by this, which counteracts the charter's right to say whatever you want, not if you're harming people. So I'm wondering why we haven't gone a little further, or why we aren't in the development of a bylaw similar to London at this point.
Through you, Madam Chair, what I would say about the flyer delivery, again, some may remember that we had a bylaw that dealt with that was repealed in 2015 or 2016. I can't remember when it was repealed. But some of the issues with that, again, as we tried to enforce, there were really two issues with that. When flyers are dropped off, it's almost impossible to identify who dropped them off. So the enforceability of flyer delivery becomes a challenge again. And so I believe at the time we had quite a discussion around that piece. And this wasn't the issue at the time, so certainly we're seeing the covered flyers. That's part of the Bill 80, I believe, that's in front of the province right now, which is a very similar bill to the London. So it's something that can be considered. It does come with challenges, and again, the enforceability of it is a challenge.
Well, yeah, I mean, I appreciate that. I know in Toronto they had their challenges with the ward news that was getting delivered. And you know, I would say that there's enough people with doorbells right now to see when people are coming up and responding in time. I'd just like to see us get ahead of the curve on this one, rather than wait and see how the playing field stops. And you know, It would be great if we might be able to come back this fall with an actual bylaw to look at and make a decision about, rather than waiting. I don't know what staff's comments on that would be. I mean, this might, who knows what Bill 80 is going to happen. I mean, it might fail, it might, and in the meantime, we're going to lose years of not being able to, women who have miscarried are going through psychological issues when they see this again. There's young children who are going through, I mean, there is harm being done here. And I think that argument would hold, but again, maybe Mr. Carr can speak more to that, but I just think the sit and wait, I would prefer a different approach if staff were inclined to agree.
Through Madam Chair, sorry about that. What I'd recommend is that you request us to, the licensing bylaw will be coming back later this fall. We can include a discussion piece in that bylaw about this and some recommendations, and at least we can put some form around it for discussion.
I would be happy to move that referral to the licensing bylaw coming back this fall, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mayer. Do we have any other speakers, questions? Duly moved. Any opposed? That's carried. 9.2, updated lot maintenance bylaw. You're the man of the hour tonight. If you need to ask questions, Jim Berry or Selena Campbell, and it is a revised agenda item that was sent to everybody, just to draw attention to that. No questions? Do I have a mover? Councillor Grant, thank you. Those opposed? That is carried. Thank you, Councillor Grant. 9.3, Julie Clark, if there are questions or make introductions, I believe is what is indicated here for the strategic plan.
Through you, Madam Chair, we are now in the home stretch of the development of Council's long-term strategy and associated four-year action plan. At the last meeting, we talked about the vision, the mission, the values, and the key priority areas. Tonight, we deal with the key community indicators, which will provide transparency on how we are progressing against our objectives, as well as the four-year action plan, which includes specific deliverables for this term of council. For next steps, there is one final opportunity for public input on this plan. Comments will be available until June the 30th, and then on July 11th, we come back with the final council strategy and four-year action plan for your approval. I will just note that the material for that will be part of the addendum of that meeting to allow the maximum amount of time for public input on that. So tonight we have Andy Potter and Sarah Lewis from Deloitte who will walk through a presentation.
Welcome. We look forward to your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Acting Mayor, members of council, good evening. It's certainly Sarah's and my pleasure to be here again. As we get into the home straight of this process, I think it's worth just remembering that this has been an extensive process. This is not the first time we've stood in front of you. We've conducted extensive environmental research, looking at best practices and emerging practices from other jurisdictions. We've had an extensive engagement of the community. We had some fun with you doing visioning sessions in our Toronto greenhouse, and we spent a lot of time with administration working through all of the output of those sessions and gathering the feedback from council that has fed into this latest version that's before you this evening. We are going to run through the entirety of the presentation first, so if I could ask that you hold your questions until the end, and then we'll work through those, obviously. Thank you.
So we'll begin tonight by looking at the different elements of the strategic plan. So this is just a bit of a review of the components of the strategy that will be that we've been developing together. So the mission and guiding principles of the council strategic plan are overarching. They describe why we exist and the values that guide our work with the town. The vision describes the desired future state of the community. Strategic priorities are the beginning point of connecting that vision to the actions. Then we look at strategic objectives, what we want to achieve in each priority area, community indicators, how we measure results from a community perspective, and then following that is the action plan. And so those more specific and tactical measures to be able to accomplish the vision. So many elements of the strategic plan you've already seen at length. These are the guiding principles of leadership, inclusivity, sustainability, fiscal responsibility, quality of life, and excellence that guide the day-to-day decision-making of the town. The vision for Oakville is a vibrant and livable community for all, and the mission, or how that vision will be achieved, is to serve the community in a responsible, inclusive way, dedicated to building economic, social, and environmental sustainability. Now we move to the strategic priority areas of growth management, accountable government, and environmental sustainability. If you recall, last time we spoke, we debated including community belonging, and it's our recommendation to maintain community belonging as being a strategic priority area because it's been strongly reflected in community engagement and has come through even to the mission statement with that phrase "for all" at the end of the vision and also being included in the mission. Moving on from there, this was the final level of detail that we reached at our last meeting. And so in response to council's comments, there have been some shifts and adjustments, which we'll go through now. We've moved complete and connected communities to growth management, which was council's recommendation, or there was some discussion on that. We did do some wordsmithing to include housing in this area, as well as that inclusion guiding principle. Community belonging has some adjustments to engaging residents to apply that to all service areas, which was another discussion we had. And we also added inclusion and belonging as a strategic objective. And again, that reflects community engagement, council's direction, as well as our conversations with staff and leadership. For environmental sustainability, there is the Division of Climate Change Mitigation and Adaptation for clarity, and there's some wording on community resiliency that's been added. And in accountable government, just some minor wording adjustments. So we hope that you can see that we've integrated the good discussions that we've had with council into some adjustments here. Now we'll take a look at the strategic objectives by priority area, and we'll also take more of a look at the community indicators. And so these community indicators will demonstrate the progress of Oakville towards achieving the vision over time. We did discuss in our last meeting quite a bit about adding detail to some of the strategic objectives, and you'll see that there's been detail added to each of these to give additional direction for the action plan. So we'll start with growth management. To grow in a balanced way, we prioritize planning green space, amenities, facilities, infrastructure, and business growth and vitality, housing in a supportive role, urban and transportation design to reflect current and anticipated growth in the community. As we work towards achieving these strategic objectives, there are key community indicators to consider, and so these would be measured to show progress in growth management. And these include the percentage of tax revenue from non-residential sources relative to total assessed value, labor force participation, the annual number of public transport trips per capita, the kilometers of bicycle paths and lanes per 100,000 population, and recreation and library facilities per capita. So that's a bit of a summary of the specifics in growth management. Then we move on to community belonging. So this involves the delivery of services so that all people are served equitably and support for community events that reflect cultural diversity and engage the whole community by working with community organizations and enhancing partner-led programming. To measure progress in this area, Community indicators include the percentage of residents who identify a sense of belonging with the community, and that would be measured through surveys that are integrated into existing surveys that the community, that the town completes. Website and social media usage, park permits per capita, recreation participation rates, and resident satisfaction with parks, culture, and recreation facilities. So moving on into environmental sustainability. This involves the protection of natural areas, building trails, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and preparing for the impacts of climate change. Some of the data points that would be used to measure progress include green area in hectares per 100,000 population, the percentage reduction in corporate greenhouse gas emissions, total residential energy usage per capita, and the dollars of stormwater infrastructure investment to increase resiliency given the changing climate. So moving forward to accountable government, Oakville will explore service delivery efficiencies and undertake continuous improvement, tools to generate revenues, advocate for support from levels of government, and building a diverse and talented workforce to support the operations of the town. The community indicators in this category are own source revenue as a percentage of total revenue, asset renewal ratio, employee turnover rate, and the percentage of service requests completed within the service standards. And that's for Service Oakville Integrated Services. This is a bit of a preview of what the community dashboard would look like. And so it would include the metrics that we've talked about today in an engaging way, something that the community can see and understand the progress towards achieving the vision.
So the other net new piece of content since we met with you last has been the development of action plans. We worked with town leadership to develop these, starting to show you how we'll achieve the strategic objectives. These action plans outline operational reviews, plans, and strategies which will align with the ultimate strategic plan. And once these plans are adopted, that will then in turn lead to a lower level and more detailed level of departmental planning and obviously budgeting and funding. We anticipate that action plans obviously will evolve over the duration of the strategy, whereas the strategy itself, once endorsed, will be fixed. And I think that's important that you bear that in mind as well.
Thanks, Andy. So in each of the strategic priority areas, there are specific actions, and I think this is where we see some of that detail that Andy was talking about. Under growth management, some of those actions relate to planning for growth in the town's neighborhoods and infrastructure, preserving those natural areas and cultural heritage, and preserving community safety. And then we continue on with growth management. Just ensuring that there are actions related to employment growth, building a strong economy, and ensuring that transportation systems are suited to the population growth and increase and improve mobility. In community belonging, we see that these actions, the plans and strategies and surveying that would happen ensure that there's an inclusive community and that the demographics of the growing community are reflected in the changing services and ensure that there's equitable treatment of the community through the services that are offered. In environmental sustainability, we see those action areas supporting the adaptation to a changing climate and building resiliency, as well as minimizing climate impacts related to corporate operations and in the community. And you can see everything from the urban forest management plan to corporate climate resiliency planning and supporting low carbon and green development standards in the community. So there's quite a good list here of work to ensure environmental sustainability. And then finally, under accountable government, there are actions related to maintaining that sense of service excellence through continuous improvement, embedding financial sustainability in annual budgets and long-term forecasts, and ensuring the professional development of staff in the municipality.
Sarah, if I could ask you just to return to the summary slide. which I think is what council had asked us to pull together, that pulled everything together. Before we turn it to council's reflections on this draft, let's just reiterate that this document has been in the public realm for a couple of weeks and will stay out there until the end of this month. So we will continue to reflect both feedback that we receive externally and from within council as we collectively see fit. So with that, Madam Chair, if I could ask you to open this up to questions, we'd be delighted to address those.
Thank you for a great presentation and all your hard work. Councillor Elgar. That was a test. Do we have any questions or comments from members of council? Okay. Oh, sorry. Councillor Haslett-Deal, my apology.
Thank you very much for your presentation, and I echo the hard work. I'm not sure how you would like the comments, just in terms of just generalities. There are a few that I can point out that I would love for you to consider. So in terms of transportation on page 265 of our agenda, where it talks about balancing safety, mobility, and environmental goals, I'd just like to understand how you envision balancing safety. And I'm wondering if that's the right word to resonate. I mean, everything we do is about making sure people stay safe. And so it's a word that jumped out at me as I was reviewing it again. So I'm wondering if you just had a thought around how that would come to life, or if you'd at least consider that that may not be the right choice. My other that jumped out at me was around on community well-being, and I know we had a fulsome discussion before. The piece that I'm feeling like isn't resonating is the importance for people to feel that they can engage with council in our planning and our decision-making. And we have a long history about the importance of public consultation and engagement. And when we talk about belonging, part of belonging is not just events, but really being a part of something and feeling like you're making a contribution. And that didn't resonate for me under community belonging, and I wasn't sure if it should go into accountable government, but again, those are comments that I would like you to consider. There's a phrase in growth management that says supporting housing developments to increase livability and attainability. And I'm wondering if consideration could be given to saying supporting housing developments that are livable and attainable. Because I think it puts the right frame around what we would aspire to do. And on that same section around complete and connected communities, I love that we've got conserving our built heritage to sustain a small town feeling. I also think it should say and respect our history, because it's not just about the small town feel, it's about where we've come from. And so to me, that needed to jump out. I'm also going to just ask on some of the tracking, I'm wondering about whether or not we can put frequency of transit service as an indicator. I don't know how possible that is to do, but that's an indicator I think that reflects the whole mobility theme. And can you just direct me to where we measure parks per capita? So number of parks per hectare per capita? Do we have it? Is it in there? Is it on environmental now?
I just need the presentation.
Needs to come back up.
Oh, yeah, thank you. There we go.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think you'll find it under the environmental one, if you can refer to that in the material. I think it's the
There we
first
go.
one. It's the green area per 100,000 population.
So is that, yeah, that's the green area in hectares per 100,000 population?
Okay.
Through the chair to Councillor Hassett-Thiel.
And did we choose green area for a reason? Because we've usually used the parks as the benchmark. Was that just a recommendation from leadership, or?
Yes, it was a recommendation actually from leadership because it reflects, I think, the way that parks are used, and we've broadened the definition out to include many of the valley lands, the trails, and those kinds of things. So green area actually reflects the full use of the outdoor space.
So will it include the ones that we cannot use? So in other words, some of the valley lands we cannot use. Again, from a community indicator, when we say we are growing our parks and our green space, I'd like to be transparent with them about what we can use. And I'd like to be transparent that it is green because in some spots we've defined parks as that are actually hardscape.
So perhaps we'll take that back in terms of differentiating out the green area, which is everything, to the usable spaces.
Yeah, classification.
Thank you, Councillor Hassett-Thiel. It's some excellent comments, and we'll take those back and consider them. The green area and parkland in particular, and that usability is something that's important to consider from a community perspective when we look at ensuring environmental sustainability.
So thank you for that. And then the one, while I have others, I'd let others take the floor. I just want to mention neighborhood traffic calming is not listed under transportation or in growth management. And yet it is a key part of both the safety factor and how we have to move forward. So I may come back, but I will leave the floor to others. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Longo and then Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Andy and Sarah, the Deloitte team and town staff and management for working on this. It's really nice to kind of see it come together. I had a question just about the community indicators. So what are the benchmarks, and then what's success for Oakville? Because you mentioned them here, but you don't actually, how do you measure that? So just if you can kind of talk to that a bit.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Longo, it's an excellent point. We discussed this quite a bit, is how to best reflect the progress towards the vision for the town of Oakville through the community indicators. And there will certainly be, as things are finalized, some sense of where we are, and that will come through fairly clearly. There will be, as we get to the development of the dashboard, some sense of direction. You know, are we looking for increase? Are we looking to stay stable? Those kinds of points would be elaborated there. I think that in terms of the targets, there is some sense of, when we're looking at the community level indicators, there are some activities on the part of the town that will move those, and then there are also external factors that will influence them. So we didn't want to tie ourselves to specific targets necessarily, but we do feel that these indicators give us an excellent sense of the direction that the community overall is heading, and that would be of interest for the public and also for council to consider in decision making.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Adams.
Okay, thanks very much for the report and the materials. So I had, I think, 3 or 4 different comments, and perhaps in no particular order. On page 10, you have in the transportation, the very last bullet kind of speaks to the active transportation element, which is something I was looking for. But I think one of my other colleagues mentioned the issue of traffic safety is mentioned there as balanced safety, mobility, and environmental goals. So it's there, but it doesn't have its own standalone piece speaking to the kinds of things that this council perhaps spends more time talking about traffic safety related things than anything else. Like every time there's an issue about traffic safety, a report on it, we we seem to spend lots of time on it. So it's something that our community values greatly and our council values greatly. And I'm not seeing it as one of the specific items that work is going to happen on. So it doesn't feel like there's anything to attach it to here. So that's something I would like to see get in there. And then on page 13 in the accountable government section, there's, I don't see anything in here about tracking overall property tax impacts. It's something that councils here have tracked for years and years. There's always been some element to our work plans around tracking property tax impacts in some fashion, whether it's tied to inflation or something else, but there's something. And there's a comment within here about being fiscally sustainable, I think, but there's really doesn't feel like there's any indicator there. And if I look back at our strat plans from the last term of council, we always had some piece there. And so I feel like that's missing. There's also nothing in here about maximizing the growth pays for growth philosophy that the town of Oakville has had for decades, I think now. And so I think that is something that's under threat, obviously, in terms of the changes and the rules and regulations that we play by, but it's still something I think that's important to this community, and I think it's important to this corporation for its success. And so I think that is something that ought to be in here. On the housing side, I do appreciate that it was incorporated by reference in the strategic priority section, but then when I looked forward to the, now I've got my pages out of order here, the next component, the action plan element of it, that terminology doesn't sort of carry forward. It then gets referenced using other terminology in the growth management part, where it talks about complete and connected communities, and then it references a number of the projects and review things that the corporation is going to undertake, which are obviously related to housing, but then we do have a housing plan review line, and that's not clear to me as to the linkage between those two things. So I wondered if we could make that stronger, make that linkage more clear so that people understand how those components work together. So obviously we're speaking to managing to the forecasted growth and so forth. So that the two are there. I understand what that is, but I don't think that's explicit. And I think that could be made a little bit better. I think those are, yeah, so on the housing plan review, I'm not sure if staff can describe that better. That's not really you, I understand, but that would be the one thing. So thank you very much. Appreciate the efforts. I know it's a big fuzzy set of things. There's a lot of moving parts, so appreciate the work.
Thank you. Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to Tom for taking the words out of my mouth, sort of. But I also noticed that was a big piece that I was going to raise as well. The housing piece just didn't seem to make it through to the action plan. I think that in light of what is clear from the last election, through polling, through everything else, that housing is a very high priority and it needs to show up in the action plan. And I don't have to add anything more to what Tom said. The other piece that I've noticed is there's very little here in terms of covenants or response or commitments on the part of council in this action plan. I think Councillor Hazelfield touched on it when she talked about community consultation. I believe you mentioned community consultation, yeah. The only place that really shows up is under, where is it, engaging residents, and it just really talks about 4 very specific things. I personally think there needs to be more overarching commitment to community engagement, particularly in light of recent announcements from the province. I think it's really important that we reestablish our intention to continually engage and to make sure that the public are part of the decision-making process, because I don't really see that as succinctly in this document as I'd like to see it. And I looked at a couple other municipal plans over the past few days, and I saw that a lot of other municipalities have some sort of wording in that regard, that makes it clear that the public are part of this as well. And I think that that's really important. And not just a staff commitment, but a commitment from council ourselves. As we are the citizens' voice, to the municipal organization. So I'd like to see something more along those lines added as well. And I can't give you the wording. I can just give you the idea. But thank you very much for your time. And thank you for this report.
Thank you, Councillor Knoll. Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, on page 268, inclusion and belonging, delivering recreational programs with attention to youth, seniors, and other equity-deserving groups. Will that change over time depending on the number of groups, or will a equity-deserving group morph over to a senior? Like, I'm just wondering, are there definition for those key groups?
Through the chair to Councillor Giddings. Yes, the definition of equity-deserving groups is one that there are some standard definitions, and we could always look at some sort of a definitions component, as we do often have that in these plans, and then that would be somewhat more clear. Would that address your question?
That'd be great. And environmental sustainability. A lot of talk about corporate operations and corporate climate resiliency plans, corporate energy conservation, demand management. What can we do in terms of tracking development, whether it be low-rise or high-rise, in terms of what kind of difference are we making with new development? Because we receive accolades on a regular basis from residents, and then they say, but what are you doing about retrofitting homes or making sure that there's geothermal in new developments, or whatever it may be? Just like to park that one there. It's, I know it would be somewhat difficult, but I think it's important to see where we're going directionally on that.
Through the chair to Councillor Giddings, we will consider that and discuss further. As you say, it is a complicated issue, specifically with the corporate sector and understanding what those impacts are. But it's certainly something that that we can discuss further and come back with some more clarification.
All right, and this probably isn't for you. We received an updated deck this afternoon from Corporate Strategy. If I could just jump over to that one for a moment. It talks about the information is going to be posted annually, available via a dashboard that is developed for the town website. So I guess, CEO Closey, this is going to, just wondering the connection between the two. Julie's here.
I'm not sure. Oh, Julie, you're there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure I understand the question. We will be posting the community indicators online so that the public, there's a certain amount of transparency there for the public, and they can see our progress. Is that what you meant?
That helps, and that will be yearly, or will there be more updates than that? Will we have the components of the four?
So the four key objectives will be clearly outlined on the website. The frequency question is a good one, and we have not landed on the frequency for all measures just yet. Some may be annual, some may be every other year. For example, the citizen satisfaction survey is every other year, but we will be landing on the frequency piece between now and July 11th when we return it for the final approval.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
Councillor Knoll.
Sorry, there's one last piece of that discussion around council accountability, and that is that I think that piece that I suggested should be in the accountable government section as well, as opposed to up in community belonging, because I think it really speaks more to the accountability of government rather than promoting belonging. I mean, ultimately, I think there's it could live in both places, but I think that from a point of view of clearly delineating our commitments to be accountable and representative and transparent and all those sorts of really great values that should be in the accountable government section. Sorry, that was it.
Okay, any further comments? Councillor Hassett there.
So just two others, and I would hope they would come up. Digital innovation. So we have a core value of leadership and striving to innovate, and yet I'm not seeing the word digital innovation or the importance of, even, more progressive data management and data reporting. And I feel fairly strongly that that's how we make better decisions, when we have that frequency and clarity on data, but more importantly, that we're innovating. And it struck me, I'm going to put my HR hat on again, from a people management perspective, doing everything we can to help our team that supports council go out and seek innovative ways that we can raise our game, and doing everything we can. And I think it's there under developing succession and training staff, but innovation just doesn't jump out at me on these action items, and the digital and data management don't jump out as well. But I do really, really love how far you've taken us, and it must be really one of the most challenging, but I think rewarding tasks to do.
Nicely said. Any further questions, comments? Seeing none, I wonder if I could, sorry, Councillor Nanda.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So one of the things I was thinking about, this is based on what some of my councillor colleagues were just discussing in terms of community belonging. And I'm not sure if this would go under accountability, but having town staff and councillors work in collaboration. So one of the things that Councillor Chi and I did is just working back and forth with our town staff. We felt that there were some issues that were really important, so we asked town staff to come out and sort of have a town hall and a meeting specifically with residents, so they could directly speak to residents. So when we have issues and it's being filtered through us and through our town staff on a regular basis, and then we have our town staff responding to residents, but then again, they're trying to filter the information through us. We felt it was important enough to bring them out. So I'm thinking maybe more collaboration or town halls. We do them within our ward, but maybe we can do them more generally in Oakville. And we just feel it'll be important over time to have different town staff from different departments come out and speak with our residents as well.
Thank you, Councillor Nanda. I do believe we do that on an ongoing basis. Staff are more than willing to come out at any time, but I think what you're trying to capture is the fact that a formal process so that the public realizes that that's a way of communicating. So whether that's done in the communication arm, I don't know, but valid point. Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you. I guess the question with the community engagement part, I have a concern with it. I don't know how we do this. Maybe I'm in the weeds with this, but there are different levels of community engagement, and there's a prescriptive way of doing it, and there's also information gathering. I would like to see it settled in what types of community engagement we are investing in as a community, as a council, and also as a town. Sometimes our residents are frustrated when we come to what we believe is a community engagement. It's all prescriptive. It's out there. Here are the recommendations. What do you think? Rather than taking the first step, having meetings come in and information gathering. I know we have our regular meetings here, but also meetings off-site and so forth, just for information purposes. So we need to have an understanding of what we believe what community engagement is in our municipality.
Thank you. Councillor Adams?
Sorry, I'm second time speaker. In an attempt to be helpful, on page 15, there's on the infrastructure side, there's a a second piece of it that talks about maximizing the growth infrastructure funding tool. So in my first go-around, I talked about our growth pays for growth philosophy, and I wondered if that could be cited there in that element as a place to put it that would be kind of consistent. Just from in terms of communicating with the public, the growth pays for growth component, that terminology, I think, is something that residents understand better than the terminology around infrastructure funding tools and development charges and those kinds of things. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, thank you again for all your work and input and patience in dealing with us. And Councillor Longo, I believe you're giving me a motion to approve, and that's of course with the revised Appendix A that was circulated. Thank you. Any opposed? That's carried. Again, with our thanks.
Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah.
And 9.4, 16-mile development project, which is budget update. And we have someone available if needs be. Any questions, comments? Councillor Elgar.
Yeah, thank you through Acting Mayor Duddick. I'm glad to see the report. I guess when I look at the numbers, we're going from 57,369,000, and we've had value engineering, which saved us an extra million. We're still at 73,869,000. So we've gone up, like, percentage-wise, that's 28.76%. It excludes the photovoltaic PV solar panels, plus various contingencies. Just like, since we're going up 28%, and then I know that you're saying the Canada non-residential building construction costs have increased 16.2%. Since the number wasn't even a year old from what we had back in June of 2022, is that a surprise to you that we're up 28% and we still have got more to throw into it yet?
Through you, Madam Chair. No, it's not a surprise, unfortunately. We've been monitoring the situation very closely, and we've been looking at other comparable projects that have also been run by other municipalities, namely Mississauga and Guelph, and they also are experiencing extreme increases as well. So what we tried to do as much as possible is at each stage of the process, we tried to build in risk mitigation and due diligence to ensure that we had done everything we possibly could to ensure that we kept the costs as low as possible while delivering the best possible facility for our residents. So we do have a presentation, but a couple of things I wanted to highlight. One, under procurement, we did a negotiable RFP, which some of you may be familiar with, something similar, which is best and final offer, which is where it allows you to negotiate after a vendor submits their bid in submission. And it allows us to look at the possibility of canceling without penalty, or to work with the successful vendor to try and find further savings. So that was one piece. We really focused on value engineering. Again, we tried to ensure the full due diligence around that. From the standpoint, it wasn't simply a case of looking at costs that we could reduce. We also looked at it within the context of the broader life cycle and maintenance, because sometimes you make a decision which seems in the short term to be prudent and you've saved money through capital, but then later you discover that you've actually incurred more life cycle costs and operating costs. So we tried to look at it from a holistic standpoint as much as possible. And we also monitored from other municipalities comparable facilities. As you know, recreation and library facilities, libraries are very strongly digital in focus now, which changes cost. And also with respect to recreation facilities, we have very specialized amenities, including 2 types of pools, a gym that has to accommodate a multitude of different sports. As we diversify, so we have to sort of think in terms of how to ensure that our designs are fluid. So while I will be honest in saying our team was disappointed that there was such an increase, I can say with great certainty that the team did everything they possibly could to keep the cost as low as possible.
So Colleen, how much do we have to get, do you need for the photovoltaic solar panels? Like what has to be added to that roughly?
Through you, Madam Chair, it's 1.3 million. One of the reasons why we didn't include it in this particular project budget is because we wanted to explore a partnership with Oakville Hydro, because then it would allow us an opportunity to leverage other potential grants and funding sources that we wouldn't have had available to us. So we thought that would be a prudent way of managing that particular issue.
Okay, and what about, how much do we have plus various contingencies? What numbers have you got that is not in this 57 or the 73,869?
I'm going to ask the team to give a little more detail on that.
Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair. So the contingencies available in this project are just under $6 million, $5,597,000.
So, okay, and that's not part of the 73.8?
That is in addition to
In addition to the 73.8?
Yes.
On a normal project of this size, what are our change orders, roughly? Like, we have a figure, okay, there's always going to be change orders. I'm just wondering, what is the normal for this type of building?
I think anywhere from 5 to 10% of the cost is in the region.
Okay. Okay. Now, based on the changes that have happened with our current provincial government with regard to development charges, which seems to be, from what I've read, a little bit frozen right now, what could the impact be on the existing residents that have to subsidize the development of this?
Through you, Madam Chair. So one of the considerations with the changes in legislation that we have to think about is what that does to our incoming cash flows for development charges and what that does to our long range or 10-year capital forecast and what we use those charges for. So both the increases to this project as well as the impacts of Bill 108, Bill 23 will be something we consider as we do our 2024 budget process and looking at our 10-year to say, what items do we need to perhaps reprioritize? Do we need to defer or push out to make sure that we're actually able to afford the things we want to do?
So we don't have any idea yet what the impact will be on the existing residents because of the provincial government's changes to the Development Charges Act.
Through you, Madam Chair. So one of the things that we are able to do is we have been reporting to Council what some of the impacts are that we're experiencing. When it comes to our long-range impact, those are some of the decisions that we're going to have to make down the road when it comes to prioritization. So it's not that simple of an answer for you.
And you actually did put that in the report, that we're going to have to put pressure on development charge reserve funds and require reprioritization of future projects. But we don't know what those are yet, correct?
Through you, Madam Chair. That will be one of the exercises we do. When we do our budget each year, we go through that exercise as it is, but that becomes even more important now when we consider that those two extra constraints. So,
and the development charges right now, the reserve funds are already negative?
So through you, Madam Chair. So our overall DC reserve funds are positive, but those are broken up into a number of different components. So our Parks and Rec development reserve funds are currently negative, as are our library ones.
They're in a negative position right now.
Correct. And I believe there's a chart in the staff report that will have the numbers. I don't have them right in front of me, but
yeah,
that'll help you out a little bit.
Wow, scary times. Thank you.
Councillor Z.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have two quick questions. So first of all, so we need to clarify if I'm a math correct. So we already initially allocated 16.5 million during the 2023 budget. So now it's increased exactly, the number is 18.725 million, right? So that's the gap is 2.225 million. That's what I'm being asked for, right? Okay. The second one, I noticed that we only have 2 binders for this construction. So now I know our staff is currently negotiating with the lower binder, and this contractor is 10% lower than the previous one. Sorry.
Sorry. Can we just clarify your previous comment? I just want to make sure that we are all on the same page. My apologies.
The first question.
On
right?
the gap specifically.
The gap is 2.225 million.
That's for the park side.
That's only for Parkside.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. The second question is that we have only two binders about this construction. So now we are currently negotiate with the lower binder about the details. So how we ensure the cost and the balance, the quality to compare with the two binders.
So our intent is to put in a performance clause as part of the contract to ensure that we're holding them as accountable as humanly possible. So we will be working closely with purchasing and legal around the wording of that.
Okay. Okay, so my question is done. So I need to say something about on behalf of our residents. So our Ward 7 residents has been patiently waiting for their community project for a long time. So according to this report, so if this approved this additional budget, so that construction can be scheduled in this July and August, right? So that's will be the residents can expect to have their new community center by Q2 2025.
So the substantial completion will be Q2 2025. It's because it takes approximately 20 months from start to finish to actually complete a facility of that complexity, keeping in mind that this is an unusual project. With OTCC, it was a standalone recreation facility. This is an expansion to an existing building that is nationally recognized for its customer service excellence. We host a lot of televised events from there, and we will continue to do that through the construction, which is highly unusual. So we need to ensure that there's access to parking and that we have all of the technical support so that there's no disruption to that schedule. So that's what makes this project a little more challenging, but we're up for the challenge and we're very excited about it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so in addition, I personally strong the additional consideration about this report. So this additional could significantly impact the construction schedule and not fair to the residents of Ward 7. So redesigning all those entire project and introducing further uncertainties may lead another prolonged wait period before our community center becomes a reality. Again, so I urge my college council to approve this budget for our Ward 7 residents. Thank you.
Councillor Nanda.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. I wanted to thank Colleen and her team for an incredible job that they've done, obviously being new on council, but just seeing everything that you have done. It's understandable that the increase in prices, it's difficult to digest. We're all feeling it personally, but it's great just seeing how we're talking about the strategic plan with inclusion, diversity, community belonging. This is something that's gonna bring all of our community together. And I don't think just Ward 7, it's gonna be all of Oakville. We've all visited OTCC, so now we welcome all of Oakville up to Ward 7. And we're just excited about great things that are happening ahead and how it will bring the diversity in the community together. So I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of our residents, and I think this is something that's gonna be for all of Oakville as well. So thank you.
Nicely said. Councillor Adams.
Thanks so much. I just had a really quick question about the park development component of it. Can you describe when the new fields specifically are all coming online and how much disruption is there to the existing fields that are in the location?
Through you, Madam Chair. Councillor Adams, it's a great question. So the construction of the sport fields and field house are well underway. with the 2 multi-purpose sport fields and the cricket pitch planned to be completed before the end of this year. And that's actually tied to meet the grant funding through the Canada Communities Revitalization Fund. The skateboard park, bike pump track, splash pad, playground, and fitness station is planned to be completed in late 2024, so next year. And then the remaining park amenities, which include the pickleball courts, tennis courts, sand volleyball courts, and basketball courts, will be completed in 2025, pending council approval of the 2024 capital budget.
So is it just the cricket pitch that's finished this year, or is it all the fields that are complete and available, that would be available for the spring of 2024 then?
So they are working towards, so there's 1 synthetic turf, 1 natural turf, and the cricket pitch working towards that for the end of the year.
So all of them would become available for the summer 2024 season?
That is correct.
Okay, that's really what my question was, so, because I know there's disruption in their use, obviously, this year, so.
Yes. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Knoll.
Thank you. It was not a question, just to provide some anecdotal information, just to support what Commissioner Bell had said about the similar municipal projects. The Halton Regional Police Board are constructing District 1 in Halton Hills right now for Milton and Halton Hills, and we're experiencing basically the same sorts of cost increases, if not a little bit higher. So this is not unusual. I think this is known as long financial COVID. But it's certainly, you're going to be hearing more about that to those members of Regional Council when we come back to report to you on that in the coming months.
Thank you for that insight. Councillor Haslett-Theil.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. Thank you for the comprehensive report, by the way. We should all just acknowledge there's lots of detail and dates in here, and that clearly articulates timing, et cetera. I didn't understand, though, what the dollar value was, and you just might have to refresh my memory for the cricket pitch. So we know that we're going to get the funds, you're going to meet the timeline, but how much money was that?
Through you, Madam Chair, the cricket pitch is just about $1 million.
Okay, and so while I have you up there, are there any other provincial or federal funding that is going to contribute to the overall cost of the community center?
Not that I'm aware of at this time, but we certainly look for those opportunities all the time.
Okay, so I'm seeing some nodding that you're looking, but maybe, okay, okay. All right, well, thank you for clarifying that. Having been a part of the trials and tribulations of trying to get an amazing facility for your community, and I think Councillor Nanda said it very well. It is for all of Oakville. It's only going to go up in price. It's not going down. It's a service. These are services that people value. OTC is jamming. So as hard as it is, I think that what's really important is that we see the end in sight and how amazing it will be. And it would be nice if the province and the feds recognized how much all of this costs. So thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any further speakers or comments? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve. Councillor Knoll? Okay. Councillor Nanda, thank you. Nicely done. No, nobody opposed, that's carried, thank you. Now we go to 9.5, amend the bylaw for the procedure bylaw. I think it's pretty straightforward. Are there any questions? Okay, motion to approve from Councillor Longo. Any opposed? None, that's carried, thank you. 9.6, corporate policy update, and that pertains to the appointments to the boards and that coming back to us. Are there any questions or comments? Oh, sorry, Councillor Giddings.
I'll raise it a little higher on the screen next time. If there aren't any questions, I'd be happy to move this, and I'd also like to about an hour or so ago, I forwarded a motion. Back when you were a councillor, you did a lot of work on this with the motion. And it talks about next term of council to have the report come to the first meeting after the inaugural, and that would give time for newly elected councillors to speak with fellow councillors, with the clerk's office, with a number of people to see where their interests may lie and where their experiences may serve them best. So would you like that read in?
We all have copies.
You've all got
I think we've all got copies, have we not?
Yeah.
Okay. Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you, Councillor Giddings.
Thank you.
And you can lower your hand.
Put your hand down now.
Thanks, Mom.
Okay, now we do have to close out the confidential 10.1. We dealt with the other 8.1. This was pertaining to the regulating, display, and distribution of objectionable images. Do I have a motion to Councillor Chisholm? Thank you. Those opposed? Seeing none, that's carried. We have no advisory minutes to approve, so I need someone to move that we rise and report to council. Councillor Agra, is that any opposition? That's carried. Thank you. Do we need a seconder for that, Madam Chair? No? Okay, so now I rise and report that the Committee of the Whole has met and made recommendations on consent items 7.1, 7.2, 7.3, 7.4, 7.5, 7.6, 7.7, 7.8, 7.9. Confidential consent item 8.1, discussion items 9.1, 9.2, 9.3, 9.4, 9.5, 9.6, and confidential discussion item 10.1, as noted by the clerk. I need a mover and seconder. Councillor Longo and Councillor Nanda, thank you. All those in favor, that's carried. Okay, we've had our information items circulated. Any issues relating to the status of outstanding issues? Seeing none, we do have a new business motion from Councillor Nanda and Councillor Haslett-Thiel, and I believe we need a waive in procedural bylaw. Councillor Elgar?
Yes, through Acting Mayor Duddick, I would be pleased too that we deal with this item tonight.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Grant, thank you. Okay, mover of the motion, I think you would like to go forward, would you? Or do you want to have our delegation speak first before the motion's introduced?
Okay, we'll have the delegates speak before I introduce the motion.
Madam Clerk, do we have Crystal joining us shortly? There we are. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us this evening on this very important issue. And you can go ahead with your delegation, please.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here this evening. Good evening, Mayor Burton and councillors. I'd like to thank first regional and town councillors Nav Nanda and Janet Haslett-Thiel for bringing forward this motion, and also, of course, for allowing me the opportunity to speak to the motion before you this evening. My name is Crystal Dodds. I am the 2-district operational inspector for the Halton Police, and I've been stationed here in Oakville for the past 18 months. I've met many of you at the various events around town, and we've had lots of emails back and forth over various concerns brought forward. Today, I want to talk about the reported incidence of intimate partner violence that has been steadily increasing in the region of Halton. It needs to be at the forefront in order to increase awareness, remove systemic barriers, and to ensure survivors of intimate partner violence can access the supports they need and to protect themselves and their families. I'm here this evening to share some important information and statistics that will help demonstrate the prevalence of IPV, intimate partner violence, as well as the steady increase in reported cases in the region since 2015. So before we talk about why we're here today, it's important to look at what intimate partner violence looked like 8 years ago. In 2015, intimate partner violence calls were at 2,700, and last year they were at 3,500. That's an increase of almost 27%. A more astounding number is the number of criminal charges that have been relayed in relation to IPV cases. In 2015, the Halton Police laid 1,145 charges. And when we fast forward to 2022, the charges had almost doubled and surpassed 2,140 charges. Our officers across the region respond to an average of 10 calls per day related to intimate partner violence. And of those 10 incidents, 30% of them result in an arrest. So when we look at 2023, and while I was waiting for my turn to speak tonight, I jumped online and I did a quick search. And I can tell you that as of about an hour ago, we have responded to 1,763 calls year to date for 2023. So these numbers are alarming. And we need to understand and acknowledge that these statistics really only speak to what's been reported. Sadly, intimate partner violence is largely unreported, and that's for a variety of reasons. Research shows that only 30% of violence against women is reported to police, and that means 70% of our survivors are not even calling us. So a question you may have is, what are the police doing? And this is an important question, because from a resourcing perspective, the Halton Police has a full-time unit dedicated to intimate partner violence, and that's the unit's only responsibility. They don't wear multiple hats. The unit has 24 full-time investigators. They have fostered incredibly strong relationships with the Children's Aid Society, the Halton Women's Place, the Halton Violence Prevention Council, and many, many other community resources. We want to do our part to ensure that we do everything possible to provide risk intervention, prevention, and social development. The Halton Police also has an incredible victim services unit staffed by incredibly caring and talented civilian service members. Our VSU members reach out to every victim of an intimate partner incident to provide resources and support. They ensure an understanding of the court process and release conditions. And when charges are laid, and in all cases, they offer and provide safety planning and connection to other community resources. They do this in every single case, and that's regardless of whether charges are laid or not. Unfortunately, with all of those resources being dedicated, the number of investigations and reported incidents to the Halton Police has been steadily increasing from 2015 to 2020, and they've remained steady since 2020, year over year. The criminal charges have actually been on the rise, though. They have continued to rise. So I'm here today to share this information, and I want to be clear that the police are not alone in this solution. You know, Deputy Hill spoke very eloquently at Regional Council last week, and he said, we can't simply arrest our way out of this epidemic. That's a reactive response, and we need to be proactive. And we have to have proactive intervention on many levels. It's impacting our community safety, and it will continue to grow. So we need to invest the time and the financial resources into upstream multi-sectoral interventions. This is not a private issue, and we cannot stay silent. We must work together because in addition to helping those survivors that we know about, we desperately want to reach the 70% of intimate partner survivors that are at risk, fear for their own safety, or those of their children, and that they're too afraid to come forward. Now, again, for anyone wanting to do the math on this, if 2022 saw 3,500 cases of intimate partner violence reported to police, that equates to 8,000 cases that were not reported. So we believe that together we can weave a safety net that will not fail those that need us most. I will leave you with a sobering last statistic, which is that in the past 40 years in the region of Halton, 22 women have died at the hands of their intimate partner. We must collectively take action in order to ensure that not one more woman is murdered. Everyone deserves to feel safe. Everyone deserves to be safe. And the last place that someone should be afraid to be is in their home. Home should be your safe haven. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for the delegation and the information you took the time to share with us. I know many of us around the regional table did have the benefit of hearing last week, but your comments tonight shine a different light on it as well, so much appreciated. Do you have any questions or comments for our delegation before I go to the mover of the motion? Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Inspector, for your comments. And I want to, on behalf of the Police Service Board, also make a quick comment that not just the sworn members of the service are dedicated to this issue, but the Halton Police Board takes this matter very seriously, and we make sure literally at every meeting that the resources are available to our staff to make sure that this is continually prioritized. And I will say, and the main reason I want to raise this right now is I spoke at regional council as well and asked that the motion be sent to the police board because we're in the midst of developing our strategic plan for 2024 to 2028. We have a 4-year strategic plan. And that strategic plan informs the service, the board, the civilians, everybody involved in policing, what the priorities are. We want to make sure that this is a priority that is clearly articulated within the strategic plan coming up. And I think that the more information that is provided to the board as we start to build that plan out right now, the more we can make sure that that is part of the mandate going forward in 2024 to 2028. We want to make sure that it is there front and center so that we can resource appropriately and make sure it continues to be a priority for the police service. I do want to shout out to the entire team at Halton Police for their dedication to this cause. They go way above and beyond. We hear the stories of the police board all the time about the work that they're doing, led by Deputy Hill and other members of the executive there, and of course inspired by the chief himself, who has taken this issue on as a major piece of his career in his 40 years of policing as well. So thank you once again, Inspector. Thank you to the mover and seconder for bringing this forward tonight. It's a very important issue. And just in summary, I just want you to know your police board is also trying to row in the same direction as our service on this matter, and we will continue to be diligent in that regard.
Thank you very much for those comments. Councillor Nanda, you're the mover of the motion.
Thank you, Acting Mayor, and I would like to thank my council colleague, Councillor Knoll, and also Inspector Dodds. Thank you so much for the information that you provided. It just shows how much more work we do need to continue to do. Acting Chair, I would like to read in the notice of motion and then speak to it. The notice of motion for declaration of intimate partner domestic abuse crisis in Oakville. Whereas the jury that adjudicated the Carol Colton, Anastasia Kuzik, and Natalie Warmerdam inquest, the Renfrew inquest, issued 86 recommendations to the province of Ontario on intimate partner violence. Whereas recommendation number 1 of the inquest is for the province of Ontario to declare intimate partner violence an epidemic. Whereas every 6 days in Canada, a woman is killed by her intimate partner, whereas on any given night in Canada, over 6,000 women and children sleep in shelters because it is not safe for them at home, whereas this past year in Ontario, 52 women, or 1 every week, were victims of femicide, whereas in Halton in 2022, there were 3,503 intimate partner violence calls made to Halton Regional Police, and there were 2,342 calls to the Women's Shelter Crisis Helpline calls. Whereas Halton Women's Place receives 2,500 calls annually to its crisis information and support line, supports 400 to 600 women through their various outreach services, and sees 140 women and children through their safe shelter every year. Whereas Sexual Assault and Violence Intervention Services of Halton, SAVIS, received over 900 calls on its crisis information and support line, providing counseling services for 872 survivors and services for 64 human trafficking survivors in its most recent fiscal year. 3,000 calls annually and provides counseling support to 400 women each year, along with programming to support public education. Whereas 93% of CAS domestic violence-related intake cases involve a girl woman as the primary participant, whereas the wait list for counseling can be difficult to access, whereas violence against women costs the national justice system, healthcare systems, social service agencies, and municipalities billions of dollars per year, and municipalities are on the front lines in addressing gender-based violence. And whereas the Town of Oakville Council recognizes that the issues of violence against women in all communities are of local importance to the health and wellness of our residents. Now therefore be it resolved that the Town of Oakville Council recognizes the issues of violence against women and girls in Halton as serious to the health and wellness of local families and is committed to engaging with community partners to educate and support our residents about the seriousness and long-term danger of violence in our community, and that the Town of Oakville Council declares, in accordance with Recommendation 1 of the Renfrew Inquest, that intimate partner violence and violence against women are epidemic, and be it further resolved that this resolution be circulated to the Honourable Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario, the Honourable Charmaine A. Williams, Associate Minister of Women's Social and Economic Opportunity, the Honourable Parm Gill, Minister of Red Tape Reduction, Halton MPPs, Halton Regional Police Service, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and Ontario's Big City Mayors. I would like to put that forward. Oh, and Halton Police Board. I apologize, that was supposed to be added in. And just to speak to, we've had a victim of abuse in Oakville who had a few words to share with us but could not join us today virtually, so I'll just speak on her behalf. And she would like to say thank you to City Council for allowing my statement to be read tonight on this important issue. I'm born and raised in Oakville and consider it an amazing, idealistic place to raise a family. However, I have been shell-shocked to learn at what a domestic abuse survivor goes through in our town to try to protect their children and themselves. I've encountered many moms in Oakville who have had similar experiences. The common thread experience is the very systems, CAS, family court, custody evaluators, and other protective systems actually often end up amplifying their former partner's abuse of them and their children. Domestic abuse rates have imploded since COVID. 1 in 3 women experience this type of abuse in their lifetime. One statistic I came across that concerned me was that the most common response a woman or girl will get from her family when she discloses sexual assault or abuse is that her family will turn against her, to blame her, outcast her, claim that they are a liar, and refuse to support them. Some studies have found that 80 to 87% of women will experience this. These are just the women that tell their families most abuse goes unreported. When you leave abuse, it does not stop. It just transitions to a new form of abuse referred to as post-separation abuse. Post-separation abuse does not just affect the victim. It has both immediate and long-lasting effects on children. Children don't just witness abuse, they experience it. This is happening every day in Oakville. An abuser uses the children to maintain his power and control over one's former partner. There are others that involve mothers being forced to send their children to their abusers to be assaulted and abused regularly during parenting time or risk losing custody for restricting access. The common rebuttal is that they are false abuse allegations and often done in spite. false abuse allegations make up 7% of all abuse claims. They are the exception, not the norm. Women need to be believed, especially when they say that their children are not safe. The risk is way too high. Once we have left, then we are forced to hand our children over to the hands of someone that has abused them. Moms in Oakville and Halton, I know, are liquidating their life savings and children's education funds to try to protect their children and themselves. This important motion can help with that. It will demonstrate that women in Oakville are being listened to and unlock resourcing to make Oakville safer for women and children. In conclusion, I will leave you with a quote. How society treats women and children is a reflection of society's health. We all want Oakville and its residents to have ultimate health. Please vote yes to this motion to achieve that. And this just shows the importance of what we believe. I think personally, I feel that this is going to be one of the most important motions I put through as my job as a counselor. And just through their words and not taking up too much time, we've seen that there is abuse going on. I think most of us, if not all of us, may have known someone or someone in our time that has experienced this and maybe didn't know how to support them at the time. This is coming at a time where you feel that this should have come beforehand, that it's come through different resources. I had the opportunity to speak to Jennifer, who's Kira's mom, and having Kira's law passed recently as well to show us how much education is important. Education is very important on all aspects to understand why this is happening and how we can stop it. So I know that my council colleagues will all support this motion. We are here to do a better job, to work together with all of our stakeholders to ensure that we can save more lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nanda. Councillor Haslett-Theo.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. First, I want to thank Inspector Dodds for juggling your schedule and really bringing home the message. I want to thank my council colleague for bringing this forward. Just watching your reaction when they said the number of domestic violence calls to the police that are coming in, I mean, it's staggering, and it blows you off your feet. Halton Women's Place, which we all know and many of us support, you know, make it clear that domestic violence has no boundaries. It can happen to anyone, regardless of age, race, economic status, sexual orientation, or education. Remember, these numbers represent coworkers, friends, family, neighbors, and they may not tell you. There is not a single community across our country that is free of domestic violence. We have much work to do. I'm appreciative of Councillor Knoll's comments about the police board and about the police service and their commitment and the size of the unit that tries their best to support. And I really appreciate the phrase, we need to weave a safety net. I'll just close by saying that I agree with Inspector Dodds, and I think we all do. People deserve to be safe, especially in their homes. Healthy relationships equal a healthy community. Let's do our part.
Thank you. Councillor Elgar has asked for a recorded vote. Are there any other speakers to the motion before I call that? Madam Clerk, I wonder if you can just record. Is there any opposed? Seeing none, that's recorded unanimously. Thank you. And thank you again for both of you bringing it forward, and Inspector Dodds for making the time to be with us this evening. Thank you so much. Number 16, regional reports and question period regarding town boards and advisory. Do we have any comments or questions? Councillor Knoll.
Sorry, I'm sure everybody's tired of hearing from me tonight, but first of all, I want to open by thanking you, Madam Acting Mayor, for your wonderful job of leading tonight's council meeting. You did a great job, and it was a very efficient meeting, so thank you. So far.
Yeah,
Depends on how,
say it, eh?
yeah, exactly, I may have jinxed it. But more importantly, it's kind of difficult to follow on such a heart-wrenching conversation, but on brighter news, I just want to let everybody on council and those watching know that this week is the start of the 2023 annual Oakville Film Festival. And I just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention. The opening night premiere is at the 5 Drive-In this coming Wednesday night at 6:30 p.m. There are still tickets available. There are events throughout the week, including at the Oakville Center for Performing Arts on Thursday and Friday nights, at film.ca on Saturday and Sunday, and there's a number of industry summits and such. All the information is available at OFFA.ca, and some wonderful films this year. I'm most excited to say that there are a number of locally produced films on the docket this year. A Ward 5 resident, David Peck, has produced a film and that will be in the film festival this year. I wish I could remember the name of it at the moment, I'm sorry. And actually the premiere on Wednesday night at the 5 Drive-In, which is an Indigenous movie, is one of the producers is a young fellow that grew up in Oakville as well, Michael Johnson. So there's lots of local connections to the festival this year, which is very exciting. And I hope that everybody can find some time in your schedule to attend one or all of the events.
Thank you for that bulletin. It certainly has grown over the years. It's become more and more popular as time's gone on. Any requests for reports? I don't know if we have any. Seeing none, I'd entertain a mover and seconder for the reading of the bylaws. Councillor Chisholm, Councillor Haslett-Theo. Any opposed? That's carried. And that concludes our business for this evening, and we are adjourned. Thank you.